Hey, as you probably know, there aren't only happy and positive people out there. There are quite a few negative and toxic ones, and I have a feeling there may be a few popped in your head right now. Now, the problem is that those negative and toxic people don't want us to do well. And so if you don't have a way of dealing with them when you're trying to do your best in your personal or professional life, they will be interfering with your progress. They will have detrimental effects on your growth. So for that reason, in this video, I want to tell you about two specific kinds of toxic people and how you can deal with them. Hey, this is Tomas from OKSNowEnough.com, helping you become the best version of yourself and create a more exciting and more fulfilling life. And it's just so hard to do that when you have to put up with negative and toxic people. So let's dive straight into it. Dr. David McClellan from Harvard University conducted a 25 years long study during which he observed a group of people and studied what impacts their personal growth, success, and happiness. What David McClellan found was that the single most influential factor was their reference group. In other words, the people that they surrounded themselves with. So if you have negative and toxic people in your life, now is the time to do something about it, because they have extremely negative and damaging impact on your life and on your growth. Dealing with toxic people is not always easy, but it's one of those things that you can get better at. And usually once you do the big cleanse in your network and restore healthy boundaries, they typically tend to stay away. As mentioned earlier, the people that you surround yourself with have a massive impact on your life. So having negative and toxic people in your life, or the energy vampires as I call them, it's not only making you miserable, but it also has an impact on the long-term trajectory of your life. Now, let me tell you about two quite different kinds of toxic people out there. The first kind is a little bit like acid, and the second kind is more like radiation. And acid-like toxic people burn you instantly as soon as you get in contact with them. They are the grumpy, angry, miserable, shouting, intimidating kind of people. They usually let you know quite quickly about how they feel about you, that they don't like you or they don't like your idea. They just don't hold back any negativity. They always have plenty to share and to burn you with. Now, the radiation-like toxic people are, in my opinion, even more dangerous, because they seem harmless and sometimes even pretend to be your friend. But through their fake smile, they're getting under your skin and into your head, and little by little undermining your success. So how do you deal with toxic people and how do you keep them away? Well, the first step is to recognize and acknowledge that you have some toxic people in your life. With the acid-like people, it's usually not that hard to notice, because, as I said, they usually let you know pretty quickly that they are not your biggest fans. But the radiation-like toxic people are usually much harder to spot. So if you suspect that some of the people close to you are the radiation type of people and that they may not have your best interest in mind, ask yourself what emotions they bring up in you. If after an interaction with them you feel down, angry, upset, demotivated, or just exhausted, they are probably energy vampires or this sort of radiation type of people. Either way, as soon as you realize that you have some kind of toxic people in your life, it's time to go to step 2. So the step 2, and the best thing you can do when dealing with toxic people, is to distance yourself from them. Now, understand, with different people, you have different relationships. We have people at work, you have friends, you have family, and every single one of those groups maybe requires a slightly different approach. So I'll take you through slightly different strategies of how you can handle distancing yourself from different kinds of people. First, how do you deal with toxic friends? Now, if your friend is directly toxic or negative towards you, kind of trying to bring you down, you need to really question whether they are true friends. The chances are they're probably not there, sticking around because it works for them in some way. In that case, I highly recommend that you just being ruthless and you start limiting the time you hang out with those people, ideally to absolute minimum or none at all. But sometimes you may have friends that are kind of negative or toxic, not necessarily towards you, but maybe towards themselves or towards world or life in general. Still, it's toxicity, and if you are exposed to it, it will poison you and it will bring you down. But if it's a good friend that you really care about, here is what I suggest that you do. Bring it up with him or her. Tell them honestly about how their negativity makes you feel. And because you're on your journey, you're trying to become the best version of yourself, or do what you do, and just explain to them that if they don't change it, you wouldn't be able to hang out with them as much. Now, I've done this in the past with some people. Sometimes it was welcomed, it was appreciated. They didn't realize that they were being kind of this negative or toxic, and they really worked on it, and it helped. Sometimes it wasn't accepted or received very well. Their toxicity just overflew. It just went, it exploded like a volcano. They were just not ready to make the change, or the friendship between us wasn't important enough for them to make the change. Next, how do you deal with toxic people at work? Well, it's a tricky one because you can't really run away from them. You probably have to work with them. So, again, try to get as much distance between you and them. If you can move your desk somewhere, do it. If you can avoid meetings with them, do it. The second thing is, if there are some people, some toxic people who are proactively trying to bring you down or undermine your work, then I highly encourage you to bring it up with HR. Hey, that's what they're for. Or you can bring it up with your boss and have that conversation, because they should hear you out. Company culture is important, and if someone is being strategically toxic towards you, it should be addressed. If there is no way for you to avoid these toxic people at work, that if you can't distance yourself from them and it's really unbearable, if it's making you miserable and upset, and there is no way in sight that they would leave or get promoted or demoted or just transferred somewhere else, then I really encourage you to consider changing jobs, because there are loads of jobs out there, but you only have one life. You may be working in a company for a number of years still, and if you're sitting next to an a-hole that is constantly making you miserable, no job is worth it. Hey, there is a good chance that you will actually find a job that is even better than the one that you have now, where you get paid even more, where the culture is supportive and encouraging. There are jobs like that out there. And so if the people at your workplace are making you miserable, hey, don't sacrifice your life for your job. And the last category is the trickiest one of all, which is family. It's a tough one because we can't quite escape. But again, it depends whether the toxicity is directed towards you or whether it's just the way the family members are. They are kind of negative and happy and toxic towards themselves and towards everything in general, not just you in particular. I suggest that you try to explain to them how their actions make you feel. Be prepared that it may be met with denial or defensiveness. And so it's important that you are not trying to be right here. Just really try to explain how their actions make you feel, because no one can really argue with that. Now, if they refuse to acknowledge that they may be doing something wrong, and if they refuse to even try making some changes in the way they maybe talk to you or interact with you, then you may need to also consider getting a little bit of a distance from them and maybe spending less time with them or seeing them less often. I understand that this can be extremely hard sometimes, but hey, it's your life, it's your happiness, it's your well-being, and it's your personal growth that we're talking about here. And sometimes you just need to be a little bit selfish for a greater good. So essentially, if these toxic people in your life are not willing to make any changes and adjustments in their behavior, then the best and probably the only thing you can do is that you try to stay away as far as possible, that you try to get some distance and minimize the time that you're spending with them. But what do you do when they're still around and there is some kind of conflict, or they're trying to spill their toxicity on you? Well, I have this fantastic little phrase that I use every single time someone is trying to throw their toxic bullshit at me, because it works magic. But first, this: never argue with toxic people. Why? Because they're extremely good at that. That's what they do all day long. That's their game. I can't play the game. You're probably not as good as they are in arguing. So don't get tangled in that. Never argue with toxic people. But when they say something that is clearly meant to hurt you, maybe a sarcastic comment or a mean question, just ask them this: "Oh, why are you saying that?" And ask that with genuine curiosity, and just wait. And what will happen is that in order for them to answer that question, they have to explain why did they ask the question in the first place. And if it was a mean question or a sarcastic comment, then they will have to explain why they're being an asshole. And they will either admit that it was an inappropriate thing to say, or they will start deflecting and fogging and explaining that they actually meant it in a good way. Either way, you taught them a lesson that if they ask you something stupid or mean or sarcastic or something that is meant to hurt you, you will question them about it and they will need to explain. And trust me, nobody wants to get tangled in it or be explaining why they're being stupid. From my experience, when you do this once or twice, they usually think more carefully about the questions they ask you or the comments they make. Look, people in your life have a powerful impact on the person you are today and the person you will become in the years to come. And toxic people are seriously compromising who you can be. They drain the energy out of you and distract you from what's important. The bottom line is that you will always be better without toxic people in your life. Hey, there are plenty of happy, positive, inspiring and supportive people out there, so why wouldn't you surround yourself with that kind of people? Now, I have a question. How do you deal with toxic people in your life? Leave me a comment in the comment section. Tell me what you do, tell me what you tried, what worked and what didn't work. I will be happy to read it and reply. Hey, until the next time, thank you so much for watching. Always appreciate you guys. Don't forget to click that little subscribe button right there. And I'm looking forward to seeing you on the next video.